So we're going to start tonight just with a couple of quick introductions and housekeeping points, and then we're really just going to get into the RePlay robot game tonight. We'll look at how teams can prepare. We'll look at what happens in a match. We'll take a deeper dive into the RePlay mission themes and the game mechanics. We'll talk a little bit about tournaments, and then really the last part, we'll take a closer look at the mission video with getting some guidance from our head ref, Steve Scherr. He's got the mission models tonight, and so we're ready to really unpack this and get into an awesome season. Next slide. So I'm Caitlin Olnitsky. I'm the Assistant Director of Virginia DC First LEGO League. On the call tonight will be Steve Scherr. You can also see his video because he does have the mission models, so if we really need to take a closer look at something, we'll be able to do that. Steve Scherr is our head ref, but he is also a First LEGO League Global head referee, so he's got a lot of great knowledge to share with us tonight. And then also on the call, we'll have Christian Jones. She'll be helping us moderate some of the questions. This will be recorded, so please know that we'll be posting it to our website and to YouTube along with these slides. So if you want to be able to refer back to them or use some of the links that we've featured, you will be able to access those later on. There is a Q&A box. I noticed there is a chat. You can use that. I'll be monitoring that as well. But we would love it if you would throw questions into the Q&A box. We will have some breaks for that, but really we'll be doing a lot of Q&A at the end once Steve has been able to share more about the missions. And with respect to time, if we don't answer every single question, we will follow up at the end afterwards with some of your question and answers. Hopefully this will be a really awesome webinar in terms of all the questions that you have. So if we don't get to all of them, just know that we definitely will. Next slide, Steve. So before I bring Steve in to talk about the game and everything, I do just want to remind teams that a lot of the resources that he shares tonight are either located on our website, on our team resources page, or we have a direct link here to the new First LEGO League site that has all of their resources, and Steve will be sharing some of those. Also on our website, you'll see our past webinars. We've already done a webinar on how to get your team started, find funding. There's lots of grants out there going through registration. If you want to know more about how to manage the robot game and the project during COVID-19, we did do a really in-depth webinar, Unpacking the RePlay Season Part 1, where we looked at the project, core values, and we really gave teams a lot of tips on how they could navigate this season. And then our last webinar was our season updates. So if you're looking for those, if you're looking for information maybe not presented tonight, we may have already presented it. And there's even great timestamps on the YouTube channel. So you don't have to watch the whole hour-long webinar. You can access whatever it is that you need. So it looks like most of the people have answered. So before I turn it over to you, Steve, I just want to let you know on the call so far tonight, 14% of the people on the call, 2 of the people are rookie coaches. We have 3 veteran coaches. We have 1 seasoned coach, a volunteer, and we have 5 people within the other category. So they may be tournament directors or other key volunteers, or maybe they kind of navigate in between a lot of those different things. So we have a pretty healthy spread tonight of who's on the call. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Scherr, our Virginia DC First LEGO League head ref.
Thanks, Caitlin, and welcome everyone to our robot game webinar. I'd like to talk in general, especially for some of the newer coaches, about how the game mechanics work and how it all interacts with a tournament. So for your team to play the robot game, how do you prepare? First thing you do is read the robot game rule book and the updates. And I'll get back to that, but it's hard to read those too often. Your team's going to build and program a robot to accomplish whatever mission objectives they're interested in. They'll practice running the robot, and they'll put together a plan for a match and practice it. And they'll want to think about timing and sequence and who does what. So since a match is 2.5 minutes long, they'll want to pick things together that will, use most of that 2.5 minutes, but not go over. And if some of the things they do leave things out in the field that might block access to other things, so they'll want to try and do the places that could get blocked before the things that would block them. Some tips we have from successful teams. Teams have one or more team members who are game experts. Teams that rely on the coach to know the rules are not as successful because they're not thinking as hard about the game. And it's okay for the coach to know the rules and the missions, but the team members ought to be able to discuss them themselves. Because if there is an interaction with a referee at a tournament, they're going to want to be able to justify why they think their robot scored so that the referee can hear them and decide whether they're correct. I do recommend reviewing the missions and the rules frequently, every 2 or 3 weeks probably. Even with a longer season like this, but at least once a month. Go back through the missions. You're probably good there, but look for details that you might have overlooked that your plan is not taken into account. Okay, and go back through the rules and think hard about those rules and whether what you're planning to do with the robot actually is compatible with all those rules. The rules have been really improved this season. I'm really excited about using this set of rules. I think they allow teams a lot of freedom to be creative and don't impose a lot of unnecessary restrictions. So, and that's really important so that your team members can think out of the box and innovate and do some crazy things. And maybe your referee won't be expecting that, and they'll have to explain why that's perfectly fine. And as long as they understand that, that's great. When you plan your match, obviously your team members are going to start with what do they actually know how to do in terms of achieving mission objectives and any team goals they might have. If they want to score points, they should think about point values. And if they want to save time, they can think about combining actions. So if they program different missions with different programs, they may then look at opportunities to combine those programs to get multiple things done in a single run. One of the resources that's available to teams this year is the RePlay wireframe and grid, which is out on the First LEGO League site, and will be out on the Virginia DC site as well, which is a schematic of the field with actually some measurements and things. So teams can sketch out what they want their robot to do. They can do some rough measurements using the grid, and it's a good tool for just kind of brainstorming and planning, and then possibly using it as part of your robot design discussion to show the judges what your team was thinking about in terms of planning the game out. So in a match, the first thing that happens, the team comes to the competition table, wherever it might be, and they'll do an equipment inspection with the referee. So whether it's a live match, an in-person match, or whether it's a remote match, the first thing you want to do each time is to do the inspection. The part of the table that isn't covered by the mat is called home. We'll show pictures of that later. Or is part of home. And that set area is divided into two parts, a small inspection area and a large inspection area. Most teams don't have any trouble fitting their robot and any other equipment that they brought into the small inspection area. And if they do that, they'll get a bonus as mission 0 for being efficient. If they choose to use the large inspection area, that's perfectly allowable. A team might have lots of equipment that allows them to do lots of specialized things, and they find that strategically the best option for them. The small inspection area and the large inspection area both have a 12-inch height limit, and that's the only height limit in this year's game. So when you pile all your things in there, your team members can kind of contain them inside that area with their hands and pile them up to 12 inches. So that's a pretty good amount of total space. Once they've done that inspection, confirmed with the ref, then they can go ahead and set up and get prepared to start. So the rules will tell you what's allowed as equipment and part of your robot. And it's Lego brand pieces of most any ilk, one robot controller, up to 4 motors of any type, and as many sensors of allowable types as you want. If you're at an in-person match, you can build multiple robots with multiple controllers, but you're going to want to leave all but one of them in your pit area when you come to the table. Okay. Similarly, if you're doing a remote match and recording things, you're only going to want to use a robot based on one controller in order to score points for that match. And yes, so the details about what's allowable equipment, it's definitely worth reading through a couple times during the season just to make sure you still understand everything. And that's obviously important in inspection and for running. So the team prepares the robot for the first launch. We have a special launch area this year, which is the quarter circle with the first LEGO League Challenge logo in it, in the southwest corner of the field, the lower left side. And the robot and anything it's going to use, needs to fit inside that area. So when we say in the first LEGO League, there's a definition of completely in, which I think is Rule 10. So we always mean somewhere in the volume over the area that we're talking about. So as long as the robot and the things it's using don't extend over the borders of that quarter circle, your team will be fine. And that'll be an allowable start. There is no height limit to the launch area this year. As soon as we launch, which we'll talk about here in a moment, then that quarter circle, known as the launch area, reverts back to just being a part of home. And so both the part of the field without the mat and this quarter circle are both together, what makes up home this year. The change from last year, when it changed from all years before. And the differentiation between the two last year caused a lot of confusion and anxiety and detailed explanations, and having them combined this year makes things a lot simpler. So for you very veteran coaches, it's okay to launch from the quarter circle and return back to the quarter circle when your robot wants to return to home. So for the launch, as I said, the robot and all the equipment that you're putting out there for it to use all has to fit within the launch area, that quarter circle. Your team can't be holding anything back from moving. So this description of the launch criteria allows teams to cuddle the robot, which is very common when they're in an in-person tournament and there's a lot of noise going on. They tend to like to hold on to it. But if, say, you have a piece of the robot that swings, the team's not allowed to hold that up to keep it in the air and not swinging, because that would be too much control of the robot at that point. For the very first launch of the match, there'll be a countdown. Lots of us use 3, 2, 1 Lego, and whatever that countdown is, the first part of the last word, so the L in Lego, is the signal that you can start your robot. And to start the robot, you signal the sensor or let a timer expire and or push a button, which is a sensor. And those are all allowable ways to start the robot this year. And for any future launches, relaunches during the match, the team just has to get the robot and all of the equipment that it's going to use within that quarter circle. That's the launch area. Make sure they're not holding anything back, and then they can launch it as soon as they're ready. They don't have to wait for the referee to say go. Your team will run its match. There's 2.5 minutes. counting down, so it's always good to keep track of that. And at the end of the 2.5 minutes, we'll have a signal, time's up, or a buzzer, or something. And at that moment, we take a snapshot, a mental snapshot of the field. So the referee or your team can stop the robot at that point, so it's not moving any further, and take a look at the field. You don't want to touch anything. At in-person tournaments, the hardest thing for teams to learn in their first qualifying tournament is that it's not practice anymore, and the table doesn't belong to them. It belongs to the referee. So it's something to think about, even if you're doing a remote event where you're recording on your own table. You want to leave the condition of the field unchanged until you've had a chance to do what's necessary for scoring. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too. There is a scoring program that's used to calculate your match score. There are different calculators available on the web, and the referee won't know your score off the top of his or her head, but that's okay, because at an in-person tournament or at a remote tournament, the score sheet will be given to the scorekeeper to run through the scoring program, and your score will be computed very quickly and be available to view. So we've got 14 missions and an inspection bonus mission as part of RePlay, and I like to kind of divide things up into themes. So the overall theme of RePlay Challenge this year is staying active through play, and staying engaged, having fun, and keeping ourselves active. So of our missions, we've got a couple of games that in real life would be competitive: basketball and bocce. We have several different things that I would put on my exercise list: the step counter, the pull-up bar, the tire flip. We see those on strongman competitions. The treadmill, the row machine, and the weight machine. And some things that are just fun. Some things you might do if you're out at the park. There's the slide, there's the bench, and the robot dance. A couple of things I put down as health and safety: the cell phone and the health units. I didn't exactly know where to categorize the cell phone, so I think we'll put it in there as a safety communications device. And then for game mechanics, we have the equipment inspection, mission 0, and the precision mission 14, and talk a little bit more about that as well. And then we've got the mission that relates to your innovation project. And for mission 1, the innovation project mission, as your teams come up with their project concept, we'd like to have them build a model, a representation of it, some part of it, out of the white bricks in bags 8, and use that and make that part of the game. So when they bring that to the field, that's part of their equipment. So it goes in the inspection area when it's inspected, and then can get delivered to a couple of different places on the field. And I hope to see every team work on the innovation project mission, because it ties the various parts of the whole challenge together. For game mechanics, these are the things that the referees are looking for that happen during play. While you're running your robot, you can only have 2 of your team members, the technicians, handling the robot during that part of the match. So it's perfectly okay to swap them in and out, but only 2 at a time. The wording this year changes some of the enforcement I've done in the past. It very specifically says while running the robot, so during preparation time, I'm okay with having all the team members in there. You can keep that from getting confusing. So we talked about the rules for the launch. Your robot and the equipment have to fit in the launch area, not be restrained, and then you signal the robot to start. Anything the robot is controlling moving around the field purposefully or containing for a strategic purpose is called cargo. And that's how the robot interacts with the rest of the field. It may take things that your team has in home out of the launch area and out onto the field. It may bring things up from the field back, or it may just be moving things around the field. And what happens with cargo is if the robot is interrupted is a detailed thing. So let's talk about interruptions. If you need to stop your robot, interrupt it, rescue it for any means, an interruption is an interaction by your team members with the robot. It should be only one of the two technicians, of course. And that's perfectly allowable. It's part of the game, but there are consequences for doing that. Okay? If the robot itself is completely in home, which is that kind of L-shaped area made of the part of the table off the mat and the launch area quarter circle. As long as the robot's completely in there, then there's no penalty for interrupting the robot. That's an area where your team is allowed to handle any equipment at all that's there, or mission models that are there. Okay. If the robot's not completely in home, then it's still okay to interrupt it, but your team's going to lose one of the precision tokens. And since those are worth points, many teams wish to avoid it. Some teams get try and avoid that too much. So at the cost of losing, maybe 5 points for having a precision token taken away, they might give up the opportunity to try and score 20, 30, 40 points by continuing to run their robot. So they should also hopefully think about that as part of their strategy. And it's always interesting to me as a referee to see if a team talks that through. If they're resistant, but they figure out that they want to score more points. That's one of the things I enjoy watching when I'm refereeing a table. When the robot's interrupted, except at the end of the match, you're going to want to launch again. And so it's got to come all the way back, be put completely in the launch area, get set up, not be restrained, and then signaled to start. If the team interrupts the robot when it's completely done and it's not going to do anything else, which probably won't happen much this year, then that's okay. That's not a loss of a precision token. And we've got kind of a do-over rule. If the team starts the robot and it doesn't move too far out of the launch area and they grab it again, which sometimes happens because they're trying to reposition it. Well, they're not allowed to reposition it, but they're going to have to restart it, but that's not going to be a loss of a precision token just for that quick grab. Okay.
And actually, Steve, I think this is a great place to jump in really quick because I think we have the same question happening, which refers to interruptions. Does the robot have to be completely inside home, or can just a small portion, like even a centimeter, be in home to interrupt it? At what point can they interrupt it without losing that precision token?
All right. Well, if you look at Rule 15, Rule 16, excuse me, if the robot is completely in home, no problem, no loss of precision token. If it's not completely in home, so any centimeter or quarter of an inch poking out over the boundary of home, then the team's going to lose a precision token.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. And if that didn't answer your question, for the people who asked it, just chime back in and we can clarify again at the end. But I think that hit it. Thank you, Steve.
Okay. So the other thing that might happen during an interruption is the robot might have cargo, and then you have to figure out what happens to the cargo. And our rule for this year says if the robot brought that cargo with it outside of from the launch area the last time it was launched, then the robot gets to keep it. potentially to try to do whatever it was going to do again. Okay. If it didn't, if it picked up that cargo out in the field and the robot gets interrupted, then if the cargo is completely inside home, then when the robot's interrupted, then the team gets to keep the cargo. If the cargo is partly inside home, then team also gets to keep the cargo, but this year they'll lose a precision token because they didn't get it all the way into home. And for anything that's not at all in home that was picked up out by the robot in the field, the referee is going to take it out of play. So they are sensible rules, and teams can really learn to do that. Sometimes when I'm refereeing a table and I've got a rookie team and they're just waiting to pounce on that robot the moment it touches home, I say, wait for it, because I want to help remind them that they need to wait for the robot and anything it might be dragging to get completely in home to do the maximum possible benefit. But sometimes it may be a strategic thing to rescue the robot quickly rather than have it drive back to home, so your team has time to go out and do more missions. So that's a team decision that they need to think about, and that's a perfectly acceptable strategy. All right. At tournaments, at all our tournaments, we're planning to have a practice match for you, and at least 3 scoring matches, of which the best score overall from those scoring matches is going to be your team's robot game score. So the practice match is there for your team to practice, to get feedback from the referees about something they might not have recognized or misunderstood. And normally at in-person tournaments, it's there for our volunteers to practice too. We get to practice queuing and all the things, and then score sheets to the scorekeeper. Okay, so if we have remote tournaments or remote robot game tournaments, which we're likely to have some of, I believe, then there's going to be an option for a practice match, probably a few days ahead of when your other recorded matches are due in. We'll have more details about that later this month, I think, as more guidance comes out from FIRST. But we do plan to give you a practice match, and we hope to see lots of teams take advantage of it. And you'll be able to get feedback from a referee about what the referee saw, and as well as what the recording might have looked like for a remote match, and what would be potentially more helpful for the referee to see and score the game. We do have one shared mission. Part of the mission 8, the Boccia mission, has a shared component. And so for remote matches, the first set of updates put in an update that said how we would deal with that. As long as your team can launch one of the cubes from the shared mission model over the wall, presumably to the opposite field if it were there, then your team will score points for that sharing. Still only has to be one cube, and in this case, it doesn't have to match the cube of the team that isn't there. Okay, but you also don't get the benefit of the cube that the team that isn't there might have sent. So it's kind of a split the difference for between remote matches and in-person matches. And we'll look at that as we go through the missions on the video. So as I said, for remote matches, we are waiting for more detailed instructions from First LEGO League. We do plan to have practice matches. That's one of the things that our region advocated for, and they thought was a good idea. So we're going to facilitate that. If you're doing a recording of a video for a remote match, some of the things that we'd like to get out of it is that you're showing the whole field and any timer you may have showing. We want to see the boundaries of home and the northeast corner, where I think the weight machine is. The corner that has the precision tokens is not as important because the referee will be keeping track of those separately anyway. And then during scoring, what your referee would do in an in-person match would be to walk through the score sheet with you, say, here's what I see for this mission, and mark it down. You'd be able to see what that was. So you want to kind of replicate that process. So as part of after the match, when things are done, you want to use your video to make sure you're showing the missions where your robot earns points, and go ahead and say what your team thinks the robot did. And that's very helpful to the referee to understand that you say, okay, the large tire is flipped over, and which color is showing. Or if you're using the row machine, you say that the disc that it pulls is pulled away and it's fully inside the target circle. So those are the things that the referee needs to know in order to evaluate the scoring conditions. And by saying them, you show that your team knows what the scoring conditions are too. And it's a characteristic of a successful team. So now we'd like to switch over to the game video and watch it and break at a couple points to make any notes that are interesting. So I'm gonna pick the video, and here we go.
This is the RePlay competition field. There are 14 missions, which can be attempted in any order. You do not have to complete all the missions. Just try as many as you can in each 2.5-minute round. Only the score from your best round will be counted. Your robot must start from this launch area, and you should program it to return to this home area when it returns from the field.
So again, let me emphasize, this entire kind of rounded L-shaped area is home, and it's a safe place to return to. And it's also a safe place for the team to handle objects that are completely in there. So if they need to arrange things, they're allowed to do that. And they can even set things up inside part of home for the robot that's running to come and encounter. And if the robot does that, then that's perfectly fine. And that's not an interruption as long as there are no hands involved at the moment of the encounter.
You can handle and modify your robot while it is in the home area. If your robot and all its equipment is small enough to fit in this small inspection area, you will score 25 points. Mission 1, Innovation Project. During this mission, you will use the white brick model that you have made that represents the solution to your innovation project. The robot moves your white brick model into the RePlay logo, or to the gray area around the bench.
So as I said earlier, I'm hoping that every team does that, both because they're proud of the project concept they've come up with, and that's looks like it should be pretty easy. It's a straight shot, either to the RePlay logo or to the gray area around the bench, and the team ought to be able to get that project representation partly into that area to score the points.
And Steve, I have a quick question
Yes.
about the attachments. The rules said that if everything fits in a certain area, that it's good. But once the match has started, are attachments able to go over the walls or beyond the field if they need to?
Yes, certainly. Anything that's attached to the robot is part of the robot. And if that needs to go over the top of the wall or be partly in home and partly out of home or whatever, that's perfectly fine while the robot is running. So as soon as you signal the robot to start, it can unfold as large as it wants to get, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mission 2, Step Counter. The robot slides the step counter slow and steady. The further it moves, the more points that are scored.
So I'm sure your teams have experimented with the step counter, at least with their hands, and they'll understand why slow and steady works better than fast and hard.
Mission 3, slide. The robot slides the people off the slide and moves them to other areas, completely in home or on the heavy tire.
Okay, so teams that want to do this, sending the first figure down the slide should be pretty straightforward because it's set up at the top of the slide. Make sure to set your second figure on the slide appropriately. It's down at the bottom of the ladder area. And in order to move it up to the top of the slide so it can go down the slide, the team technicians are not allowed to touch anything outside of home except for their robot when they're interrupting it to rescue it. So if your team wants to score both figures, then the robot's going to have to be able to raise that second figure up to the top of the slide. So I expect that's probably going to be a little bit challenging. And I always try and guess which missions are easy for the teams and which are hard. And I'm usually surprised by how teams come up with great solutions that I never thought of. But that just looks a little tricky to me.
Really quick, Steve, before we move on, I know that there was an update about this, but will teams be able to set up a jig, which they use to align things in that L-shaped area this year, or into the fourth quarter circle? Where were they able to put their jigs?
Yeah, that's a great question, Caitlin. So a jig can be used to help your team position the robot if it needs to be in a specific position or a consistent position when it launches. And last year, because the restriction on the launch area, things that were allowable for jigs were kind of limited and confusing. This year, because the launch area is part of home, it's okay, and it's explicitly okay for the jig to extend out of the launch area particularly and into the rest of home. So it can reach all the way out to the west wall, it can reach down to the south wall, whatever your team needs for it to do. Also, because the jig's not going to be moving by itself when the team launches the robot, teams are allowed to actually hold on to the jig this year when they launch their robot. And that is a significant change from previous years.
Awesome, Steve. Thank you.
Mission 4, bench. The robot flattens the bench, removes the backrest, and gets cubes into the hopscotch spaces.
So that's a lot of different motions. So it'll be interesting to see how teams solve that, whether pushing the bench down and taking the backrest out are both easy, or if maybe one of those is harder than the other, and then being able to drop cubes into the hopscotch spaces. So I'm interested in seeing how teams attack this throughout the season. It is very close to the launch area, though, so they'll be able to get there quickly to do whatever they need to do. And so there's multiple motions involved here. A team does not have to do all parts of the mission with a single program or a single launch from the launch area. If the team were first to send the robot out to pull the back off the bench and then were to reconfigure the robot with a different attachment that would allow it to flatten the bench and put the cubes out, that's perfectly okay, because we only care about the condition of the field at the end point of the match in order to determine scoring.
Mission 5, basketball. The robot gets a cube into the crate and raises the crate up the basketball post to the middle height, or to the top height.
So I know we had a question about that in previous webinars, Caitlin. And the basketball hoop, as the video says, the robot's got to be doing the raising of the hoop to either the middle height support or the top height support, and end up with a cube inside the basket as well. So that's kind of an overhead lift, and so that'll be certainly challenging for a lot of teams to get that to the top position if that's what they want to do. If they want to go to the middle position, that's perfectly okay. And even if it's in the bottom position, if there's a cube in the crate, that scores points as well.
And Steve, one interesting feature, can the basketball crate come all the way off? Can teams overextend?
Well, there is really nothing that's holding it on. So yes, it's quite easy to go too far. So the robot's got to have good control if it wants to go for that top support.
Awesome, thank you.
Mission 6, pull-up bar. The robot passes completely under the bar in either direction, then later comes back and lifts itself off the mat at the end of the match.
Let's look at the next mission as well.
Mission 7, robot dance. If the robot is dancing on the dance floor at the end of the match,
Okay, so let's talk about the pull-up bar mission and the robot dance. First of all, there are points on the pull-up bar mission for driving the robot completely through the pull-up bar's frame. And that's an exception to the standard rule for scoring. As soon as the robot has done that, the robot has scored points for that mission. Okay, and it doesn't have to be driving completely under at the moment the match ends in order to score. And then we have two end conditions for these missions. At the end of the match, if the robot has supported itself and is hanging from the pull-up bar, so it's totally off the mat, or if it's dancing over the dance floor, it can score points. So your robot's only going to be able to do one of those, unless you've got some astounding sense of balance. So I don't think centers of gravity would let you potentially do both. But if any team wants to try it, I'd be happy to look at pictures. So for the pull-up bar, the robot needs to hold itself off the mat. So if you're showing that in a remote match, make sure that your video shows that there's space between the robot and the mat. Okay. And then for the robot dance, there's also an update that talks about that. But the robot has to be dancing, and however robots dance. And the one thing we know about dance is it's not standing still. So we'll be looking for the robot to making some kind of a repetitive motion, some kind of motion over the dance floor to be able to score. And the controller has to be over the square part of the dance floor in order to score for that when the buzzer sounds, when the time expires. So that'll be fun to see what different teams come up with for their robot dance. And that's why I don't expect teams to actually halt their robot before the end of the match, because if they want to score points for the end of match conditions for mission 6 or mission 7, then the robot's got to be on. So let's move on.
Mission 8, gotcha. If both Scherr models have sent only one cube anywhere into the opposing field, and those cubes color match each other. If there are any color cubes in your frame or target. And if there is at least one yellow cube completely in your target.
Okay, so there's a lot going on in this mission. The small half of a octagon, half of a stop sign area. At the center is the target. So you want to have at least one yellow cube there. You can have more than one yellow cube. You can have other colored cubes. That's perfectly fine as long as there's at least one in the target. And it's got to be completely in the target in order to score that set of points. Any frames that are, any cubes that are completely within the frame area, including the target area, then those are going to score points as well. And then the Scherr model, we talked about the special condition. If you're in an in-person match in an opposing team, probably you'll want to work with the other team to determine what colored cube they plan to send over, so you can make sure yours matches theirs. So take opportunities to communicate with them in advance when you get to the table, whatever is necessary in order to score that Scherr mission, if that's something you're planning.
Really quick, Steve, I did want to throw out there that I know in a remote setting that this is going to look a lot different. And first is putting together guidance. But Steve, one question that did come up: if your table's on an actual table, will the cube be just allowed to fall to the floor, or is that something that we just kind of need to wait until we get more guidance from first?
If it's on a single table because you're doing a remote match, then the cube can fall to the floor, or you can have somebody there to catch it. As long as it goes over the wall, then that's going to count for the 25 points for the shared mission. Okay, that's part of the initial update.
Awesome, thank you.
And I'm sure there'll be other questions in the Q&A. We need to save time for that about this mission.
Mission 9, Tire Flip. The robot flips tires white side up, the heavy black tread tire and the light blue tread tire. If the heavy tire crosses the red flip line at any time, it scores 0. The robot moves the tires into the large target circle.
So that one's pretty self-explanatory. As long as the tires end up within the circle and are flipped, they'll get points both for being flipped and in the circle, unless the heavy tire went over the red line. And then if they're flipped, so the white side showing up anywhere, as long as the large tire hasn't gone past the red line during the match, then they'll score for that. Those are independent, or the flipping part is independent of being in the circle. In order to score the target circle, the tire does have to be flipped.
Mission 10, Cell Phone. The robot flips the cell phone white side up. Mission 11, Treadmill. The robot spins the rollers to move the pointer clockwise. The further it moves, the more points scored. Gray, red, orange, yellow, light green, or dark green.
So again, make sure and show that to the referee on your video.
Mission 12, Row Machine. The robot moves the free wheel out of the large circle and into its smaller target circle. Mission 13, Weight Machine. For the match, set the weight machine to the color you want: blue, magenta, or yellow. During the match, the robot forces the large lever down until the little yellow stopper falls to score points: blue, magenta, or yellow.
So that's a part of the setup that your team needs to do for every match. And hopefully in a in-person match, the referee will ask if it's set up the way they want it. And in a remote match, it would be good to comment to the referee, we've set up the weight machine where we want it, just to make sure. And obviously, at different places on the weight machine, it's going to be harder to lift. So your team's going to figure out what works best for them.
Mission 14, Health Units. The robot collects health units from around the field, then moves them to target areas, touching the RePlay logo, touching the gray area around the bench, or looped over the pull-up bar post.
So this is a requirement where being in is not sufficient. It's actually got to be touching, so in direct contact with.
Question 15, precision. If you interrupt your robot, you will lose a precision token. Precision tokens left on the field can result in extra points.
Okay.
Remember to read the robot game rules and check for any updates during the season. Good luck!
So definitely do look at the rules. Do look at the setup, the field setup, to make sure that things are set up properly, and double check that, after a couple of weeks, just to make sure you remembered it properly, because that's something I have to do as a referee myself, is to double check to make sure I remember that precisely. But follow those instructions. The setup's pretty straightforward this year, and you should be good. I guess we're still waiting on recommendations from FIRST about improving the dual lock. So we'll see what happens. But you can, we'll wait on their recommendations. It's not hopeless. So, excuse me, at this point, we've made time for questions. I guess we still have almost 10 minutes left. So, Caitlin, what do we have?
We've been answering questions as we go along. One question that did also come out about the boccia mission. The question was, can you send both cubes? And I'm wondering if that means, can you send over more than one cube at a time? Could the robot launch multiple cubes over at one time?
The robot certainly can. It's an allowable action, and especially with the Scherr model, where there are two cubes kind of primed and ready to be sent over the wall. Most of the time, you'd rather conserve your cubes so that you'll be able to put them in your frame and be able to score points for them that way. If your robot does send more than one cube over the wall as part of the boccia mission, then it fails the scoring criteria for the shared part of that mission. And so the 25 points are not available in that case, because it can only send one cube over, and in an in-person match, the other team has to send exactly one of the same color.
All right, now I'll put that answer in writing as well. A question that we received beforehand, and again, please feel free as we're doing this last couple minutes to put your questions in there. Can teams complete the dance floor mission and the pull-up bar mission in one run?
They can do both actions, but in order to score points for both missions, they're going to have something that is that can be support itself off the mat while hanging from the pull-up bar, while also having the very heavy controller portion way over the field, over the dance floor. So I just think that physics is not going to let that happen. But teams are welcome to try. But both of the scorings for those are at the end of the match. So there's only 1 point that's the end of the match.
Okay. Another question I think would be more for me, but we have received the question, when will we be updated about when the events are? We are working really diligently right now, talking with our partners in the community, with the different people that run our events. We will 100% make this decision by early November, but we really hope after the next couple of weeks, we have a lot of calls coming up with our key volunteers and our staff. We're hoping to make that sooner. The competition season this year, if you haven't heard, has been pushed to mid-January, late February of 2021. So you will have more time. It's not like we're going to run competitions in November. So just know we're getting it out as soon as we can, and we'll let all registered coaches know. But we're still making that decision 100% by the beginning of November, though. Steve, you'll be able to answer this question. For some of our newer coaches out there, or maybe you've never tried this strategy, what is a jig? We talked about it, but what is it made of? What is it actually?
Well, since a jig would be part of your equipment, it needs to be made out of Lego pieces. Okay. But it could be a structure or a triangle or kind of something that's got a space to put your robot into, so that you can put it in a known place on the field, line against the wall, matching some of the lines inside of the launch area. Put your robot there, and then you'll know that it's pointing in a particular direction. So just as in a wood shop, you might use a jig to hold a piece of wood in a particular position so that you can work with it. This is there to help you align your robot for a start.
Okay. I think we have time to sneak in at least one more question. And we got this one beforehand. In the tire mission where you have to flip over the two tires, can a single tire score if you only turn over one tire, or do both tires need to be flipped over in order to score?
Both tires are independent. Each tire is independent. So you can score for the light tire, and you can score for the heavy tire. And if either of those is in the target circle and is flipped over, then either one can also get the additional points for being in the circle. So those are independent.
Okay. Just wanted to throw it out there. It looks like we have answered all the questions that have come through, and that actually works out really well with the timing. So to wrap everything up by 8, and again, before I move on, as you have other questions, please send them to our questions email. If we can't answer it, we'll share it with Steve. The listserv is also a great place to connect with coaches and get really good feedback on that. We do have some other webinar opportunities coming up that I would like to share really quick. So on September 22nd, we'll be doing a robot design deep dive. So today was more about the robot game. Steve's position really isn't to share a lot of building strategy or things like that. So instead, we really want to hear from some of our awesome Virginia DC teams. We'll have at least 2 teams who have been to several tournaments, have a great wealth of knowledge to share with you. They'll be talking about their engineering design process and what they go through. On October 13th, we'll actually be talking more about the project. We shared details about the project at an earlier webinar on August 11th, but we're really going to take a deep dive and also talking about how you can take your project to the next level with the Global Innovation Award. We actually had 2 teams from Virginia make it to the top 20 in the world, which was really exciting. So you'll be able to hear some from them. On October 27th, we'll be doing a team community outreach. We know during COVID that the way that teams engage with their community is going to be different, so we'll be hearing from teams on that one. And 2 really important webinars on the next slide, Steve. Our last 2 webinars, I know that a lot of people want, they want the information, they want to know how we're going to be running events. So on November 10th, we'll be doing a special session on tournament judging. And on December 8th, we will really go in depth as to what an event will look like in mid-January, February. So you have plenty of time to prepare your teams for that. And the last slide, Steve. You'll be able to register for those webinars, which a lot of you on the call already have, and you'll be receiving your invites as we about 2 weeks before each event. So you can register on our website. We'll be able to send these slides out afterwards. And before I end, Steve, I got this one last question that I do think is important. So we're going to end on a question. For your innovation project mission, can the model look a little bit different than your project? Does it have to look exactly like your innovation project, or what are kind of the rules of variation?
It's a representation for you of your project. The referee really doesn't have any details about your project, so anything that you present that's of the proper size and color is going to be accepted for that. So let your imagination run. We saw in the video something that had a little bit of a hoop, but a detailed thing. We saw some very interesting innovation project models last year. And so if it's all of your project or just a piece of it, then a key component, that's perfectly fine too.
Okay. So to end it, I have had a couple people ask where to show the website where the webinar schedules are. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and link it right now in the Q&A. So it will, excuse me, I'm going to link it. Actually, Steve can pull it up. Steve, if you just go to VA+DC.FLL.org. And this is our new site under selected program. If you go to challenge and then under teams, the teams tab, you go to team resources. And actually, if you just click on Team Resources, it'll take you to, it's the easiest spot.
That's the easiest way to.
Yep. And then if you just scroll down a little bit, we have an entire section on our webinar series. So it gives you all an archive as to all the older webinars we've done that have nice timestamps in them. And then it gives you the page that you can register for our upcoming sessions. Here you can register for all of them at once, or you can register individually. And about 2 weeks beforehand, we'll send you the invite so you can get it on your calendar. So hopefully we answered all those questions. And again, please hit us up at the email questions at VA+DCFLL.org. And we'll be sending this the recording and the slides out later on. So with that, Steve, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you to all the participants. We had all your great questions. And again, you'll see this recording later, and we hope everybody has a great evening. Thank you, guys.
So long, everyone.
Bye.